Morning. My name is Taylor Randall. I'm Dean of the David Eccles School of Business, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this installment of Navigating COVID-19, How to Rebuild Your Business and Reactivate Our Community. We're thrilled to be offering these webinars throughout the state of Utah and beyond, thanks to the gracious underwriting of the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation. We come to you from the Mariner S. Eccles Institute of Economics and Quantitative Analysis. Mariner Eccles was a remarkable figure in our economic history of the United States. He led the Federal Reserve, and his policies brought this nation out of the Great Depression. What you're going to hear today is an intellectual collaboration between the faculty here at the Institute, Levitt Partners, and the Cynosure Group. Our host today is Governor Mike Levitt, and today we're going to be talking about two big elements of our society, schools and sports, and we're going to see how they might come back to life. So I'll turn the time now over to Governor Levitt.
Well, thank you, Taylor, and welcome everyone to this discussion of how to rebuild your business and how to reactivate our community. Well, big news in Utah. The last day or so, we've learned that there's going to be a substantial portion of Utah that will be moving to yellow, or what is characterized as low risk. We all welcome that. And we are optimistic that the rest of the state will get there fairly soon as well. So today I'd like to talk for a few moments about what that means and how it is that we use this period of time to energize our businesses and our community. Let's start by just a brief conversation about the whole idea of opening up. Now, opening up is a gradual transition between what we have been practicing, which is group behavior, that is, stay at home, keep your businesses closed, work from home, no gatherings, etc. We're all familiar with it, to a more individual behavior. Now, individual can mean person by person. It could also mean organization by organization. For individuals, it's hand washing, doing the things that we know to distance ourselves appropriately, managing our behavior. For organizations, it's some complicated things about how to do business and at the same time serve our mission. Social distancing, like a lot of medical interventions, has side effects and it has limitations. Some of those limitations are economic, some of them are social, some of them are personal. I have a friend, and many of us will know or had this experience directly, who had a painful condition. Medication was very useful in being able to control it. And over a period of time, my friend learned that it relieved the pain, but there were some side effects. Sometimes he didn't feel like he was thinking as clearly as he would like. Other times he learned that if he did it too long, it could have profound long-term effects. Well, the social distancing that we've been doing is a medical intervention, and we know as well that it has side effects. We've seen it on our economy. We're beginning, as we all know, to see it in society. Studies are showing that almost half of us now are feeling a bit more anxiety about things. So these social distancing medical innovations clearly have a place, but they are clearly require us to receive them as limited. So this opening up that we're doing is a rebalancing. It's a time for us to rebalance and a time for us to learn. It's important that we recognize this isn't a declaration of victory. COVID-19 and the coronavirus is still with us. It's still dangerous. But we're having to learn now to do this transition between our group behavior and our individual behaviors. COVID-19 is a new risk in our lives. It's a very individual risk. And as individuals, our behavior is going to be affected by our own priorities, by our own set of circumstances, and by the sense of risk tolerance that we have. Everyone is a bit different in this process. So we'll be learning as we go. We'll learn lessons. We'll learn how our behavior what our behavior produces. Yes, we are right now outperforming the disease models in our state. We're doing better than people thought we might, and that's good news. We're still a little unsure as to whether that's because the models might have been a little more pessimistic. After all, it's just mathematical models and not necessarily reality. Or is it because we've done such a good job in our social distancing? And so if it's that, and we've done a great job, and I think we have, what will happen as we now begin to move from red to orange and orange to yellow and ultimately to green? What changes will we see? We have to learn and rebalance ourselves. A primary category of learning is how we will practice social distancing and still have a fulfilling life. There are many in our community who have circumstances, either just age or medical conditions, that in fact make it difficult for them to loosen up their social distancing processes. And they are particularly vulnerable, and they have to learn, and we have to learn. I happen to fall into one of those categories. We have to learn to do that and still have a fulfilling life. And that's the subject of our conversation today, not just as individuals, but as a community. How can we rebuild our businesses? How can we reactivate the community? And we're going to be talking with let's review our agenda. We're going to be now talking about the schools and how they're planning, students, and how they're going to be returning this fall. We'll be talking with Sydney Dixon, who is the state superintendent. We'll then talk with Mark Harlan. Mark, of course, is the athletic director at the University of Utah, and an important figure in sports not only here in Utah, but nationally. We'll talk about what's going on in the campus, what we can expect in sports. We'll then talk to Erica Hansen, who is a community relations manager at Hogle Zoo, and we'll learn about how the zoo is adjusting. Now, I want to remind you as well that this is an interactive conversation. We're going to hope that you'll have questions, and you'll notice at the bottom of your screen that there is, in fact, a chat button. And if you'll push the chat button, it'll give you an opportunity to ask questions, and our panelists will respond to them at the end. So let's go to our first guest, Sydney Dixon, the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. She works at the Utah State Board of Education. Superintendent, welcome. We're delighted that you're here. Tell us a little bit about the job of State Superintendent. It's a big job. Tell us about it.
Well, it's a big job. It's a fun job. I have the opportunity to work with thought partners, get out and visit our 41 schools and our over 100 charter schools, 41 school districts and over 100 charter schools, and to mingle with parents and just really work together as a community to make education happen for our students.
So during the time that I was in public service, I visited a lot of schools. And I came to understand that schools are ground zero for a lot more than just the learning process. You see there, as a result of the fact that you have so many children in so many communities, anything that happens in a community has an impact, whether it's a social impact, personal impact, or an economic impact. Talk a little bit about what you're seeing now. Even though you've been out of school for a time, you're really, I'm sure, seeing a lot of implications. Tell us about that.
Right. I think you described it well. Schools are a complex ecosystem, and it's not just about coming to school and being part of a community of learners, but it's really everything that goes into that, the social emotional aspect, the community aspect, the family dynamic. So there are many factors at play in a school, and you step into a space that we haven't been in before with COVID-19, and suddenly stopping brick and mortar access, it really magnifies a lot of those complexities of the system.
So how are you going about this? I'm assuming you've laid out some objectives and some things that are priorities for the schools and giving guidance to local school districts?
Yes, we've approached this with a 3-phase plan. So we were at the very last day of the legislative session, and we were celebrating $403 million in new funding. It was a very exciting time. and thinking about the new programs that we had been waiting on and hoping that would be passed, new leadership initiatives and school safety initiatives and funding to go along with it. And so we were celebrating this great moment while keeping a watchful eye on the coronavirus. And within 24 hours of celebration, it was just like whiplash. We suddenly closed schools based on the statutory authority of the health department in consultation with the governor. And making that declaration in some states was really catastrophic. For us, we'd been engaged in a digital teaching and learning initiative over the past few years and really had been a leader in digital learning for a while. So we were able to pivot in many ways very quickly to engage in remote learning. Our amazing educators and staff and school leaders jumped in and spent a weekend and another 2 days just really trying to get ready and make sure that students had tools in their hands and there were lesson plans. I want to pause though and say, in the words of my good friend Pam Perlich, a great economist, she described this recently as one of, it may have felt like raindrops to some, a thunderstorm to others, and a hurricane to some. And that's really applicable, I think, to our schools as well. For some families and educators, it probably did just feel like a few raindrops, but for some, it really felt more like a hurricane. And we've had mixed results, but we know that we've had a lot of great results as well. And there are lessons we've learned. So in these 3 phases, the first thing that we leaned into, which we're calling our new now, not our new normal, like many of you may be framing it, because there's nothing normal about this for us. But in this new now, we were focused on 5 essential things: making sure that our kiddos were fed, making sure that learning could continue, which I've just described, making sure that we kept people employed. We think about all the people in this ecosystem: bus drivers, our paraeducators, cafeteria workers. So thinking about how we might pivot and use their skills as well and be able to employ them, and making sure that our kiddos graduate on time and knowing what these seniors were looking forward to. And then last but not least, in fact, this is probably the most important part, trying to support our students, families, and teachers with social, emotional, and mental health needs, because we know this is a very stressful time. So those are the 5 essential things we've been focused on. As we move into the near future, which is summer, we're trying to now think about unfinished learning and learning loss and how we can find out where kids are at, what they need, and how to move them forward. Now, while planning for the near future, we're also looking at a new future, which is restart in the fall. So we're restarting and recovering what we've lost, and then reimagining what school could be like. So trying to blend all 3 of those phases together, and mitigating dire circumstances while planning along for the summer and the fall.
You know, Sid, listening to you talk about those 5 objectives, it really makes the point of how schools really are ground zero and how so much more comes and can be learned from schools. I mentioned this as being a time for rebalancing and for learning. I'm guessing that we'll be learning as we go. What are some of the things that you're most interested to learn as we begin to open up?
We have to pay attention to safety factors first. And so as we think about what that means in schools, and we talk about social distancing in schools, and we talk about different hygiene procedures and entry points and kids congregating in common areas. I mean, there are just so many things to think about, and they're different for every level of schooling. So safety first, and really trying to get our buildings and our procedures and protocols right so that kids can come back safely in the fall and families will feel comfortable with that. And of course, we work very closely with the state health department and our local health departments. And we know that context matters, given that we have urban and suburban settings where we have more of our large class sizes. And then we also have our very small schools and rural and remote schools. And so we have to think about safety, but also thinking about some blended models. So there are some students and families based on risk factors who may still need to be learning remotely. And we still have a digital divide. In spite of our great efforts, we have families and teachers who don't have access to broadband that is sufficient enough for their needs, or broadband at all. So we've been tracking that county by county, district, and school to see what the needs are for our families. And those are all the factors that we have to think about. And then really we're leading into this portrait of a graduate work. So trying to get clear about the essential skills and knowledge and um, applying all of that to the real world and to world of work. And so really reframing how we think about school more broadly than just academics and finding out what's essential and then really personalizing education for kiddos. And that is with and without technology as well. But how do we make this personalized so that for every individual student, they can get the education they need, where they need it, and when they need it. And that's very different than being bound by bell schedules and bus schedules.
So I know that every person viewing this will remember the first day of school, not just the first day in first grade or kindergarten, but every first day was profound. What do you think the first day of school will look like this year?
That's a great question. I think it will look different in every context, but I do believe that based on what I've seen at the end of this year, where we have so many teachers and school leaders and parents and community members and school employees leaning in to let students know that they're still loved. I think what you'll feel coming into the building on the first day is more community and love and embracing, maybe not physically, but emotionally embracing than we've ever seen before. And I think it will be just a great welcome back. We've all missed each other in the spring. I think we might see a change in some schedules or depending again on how the risk factor plays out in the fall, schedules might look a little different. Class sizes might look a little different. Where students enter the building, how they eat in the lunchroom, those things might be something that we're not used to. So there will be some of those changes, but there will certainly be I think a lot of supports for our kiddos walking in the door.
You mentioned that things could be a little different from school to school. Talk a little bit about the decision process. Where are decisions made? How are they made on the degree of change in a school or how things will operate?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a lot of confusion out there about who makes those decisions. First of all, to close or keep a school open or determining level of risk, that definitely comes with the health department. So the state health department looking at state risk factors in collaboration with all the local health departments. And one of the silver linings that has come from this is this great tight relationship among our local health departments and our schools. So they're working very closely together about the risk level. And then our school personnel are working right now on thinking about different instructional models that might lend themselves to levels of risk. We are working very hard to be nimble so that if, at any given moment, if we're green, yellow, orange, or red, regardless of the level of risk, we can adapt. And so some of those models might be something like a school might try looping, meaning that they stay with the same teachers through a number of subjects in secondary school, or so they're in a cohort, or in the elementary school, they might keep the same teacher that they had last year. You might see a staggered schedule. And those kinds of decisions, the instructional models, again, will be at the local level. We'll put guidance and models out there that they might wish to try and adapt to, but that's where the creativity really comes into play. I really trust our educators and they're creative, and I know that they will work with their local health departments to see what models might work best in their school, because the building is different. Not every building is the same, and it can't always accommodate. All buildings don't accommodate the same kinds of instruction.
Well, for almost every school, and I would say for every student, that the classroom work is part, but then there's that extracurricular activity that is so important for a student's development. How will they be affected?
Yeah, that's another thing that we're looking at. I think I think I would be remiss if I didn't state that the humanities and these hands-on courses that we take in career and technical education, arts and humanities, they really are the fiber of our schools. And it's much more difficult when you have courses where you have to have hands-on with machinery or you have a lot of students together. It's a little more challenging to think about social distancing. You might see masks in schools on kiddos to help mitigate some of the proximity of students, and masks on teachers as well. But some things, as we we've seen in our own experience can be done remotely. So I'm mesmerized by bands that can congregate online and choirs. And so that's not ideal, but it shouldn't keep us from engaging in the arts. I've seen some amazing art lessons that have been infused into content areas that families can engage in. You're going to hear from our good friend Eric at the zoo shortly. And there are places like the zoo and museums and others where we can, at any time, if we have to pivot to home, we can see those things online. So there is just a blend of all sorts of instructional strategies.
So one final question. I mentioned the fact that one of the side effects of the, the group behaviors, the social distancing, business closures, is an economy that's been affected. And I'm guessing that that could have an impact on schools and school budgets. And is that correct?
Absolutely true. In fact, we spent our morning as a staff looking at just the county impacts. We've been getting data from Department of Workforce Services about layoffs and looking at unemployment rates. We're looking at broadband access. We're looking at a variety of factors because we will be getting some federal dollars that go out to our schools through the CARES Act funding. We know that we have budget cuts looming from the legislature. So really looking at income tax and how the loss of that is impacting our overall budget. Sales tax definitely has an impact. Property tax, those are all taxes that impact schools. So the loss of that revenue definitely will impact the budget. And the CARES Act funding that we get is one-time money to try and plug some holes. So we're trying to be mindful of context and some overall things that we need in our schools. We're going to be needing safety equipment before, personal protective equipment that we haven't had in our schools. And sanitization that is amped up. You know, it's like sanitization on steroids that we haven't had before. Hand sanitizer wipes, the things that everybody's after, we need in our schools. And then just really looking at some of the programs. We're so lucky to have the programs that we do in our schools, and we hate for any of those things to be cut. So it's just a difficult time, and we need to do everything we can as a community to lean in and be mindful of the education aspect, the social emotional aspect, and then the childcare aspect as well, as people try to get back to work, and looking at those counties where we need to make sure all of that is in play so that families and businesses and communities can be whole again.
Well, may I just say on behalf, I know of not just those who are watching today, but every Utahn, how much we appreciate education and educators. We know that, like first responders in other ways, that they're going into an environment that has its dangers. And I hope that you'll convey, as you move about in your job, the appreciation that the ordinary citizen feels. And so thank you very much. And we look forward to a great school year.
Thank
I want to
you.
remind everyone of the chat function. If you have questions you'd like to ask Dr. Dixon or our future guests, please click on it and ask your question. We're now going to introduce Mark Harlan, who is the athletic director at the University of Utah, a very important figure in Utah sports, which is a very important part of our culture and our community. And Mark, we're delighted that you're in Utah. We're delighted that you're representing such an important part of our culture. But it's not just here. I mean, you have a big role in intercollegiate athletics around the country. I understand that you're working at the Pac-12 level and national. You mind telling us a little bit about that involvement?
Well, it's great to see you, Governor, and very honored to have this opportunity to speak with you today. Yes, blessed to be a part of the Pac-12 conference, and currently I'm one of the chairs of our football subcommittee in the league as we look to bring back football this fall and also represent the Pac-12 on the National Football Oversight Committee at the NCAA. So it's fair to say we've been busy.
Yes, you have. So you're the right person to ask. What's it going to look like this fall? Are we going to have football games?
Well, certainly that's our plan, Governor. We've really are planning in all regards to be able to stage football. We understand not only in the state of Utah but also in this country the place that college football has. passion reigns in that sport. And we see that time and time again, of course, here at Rice Eccles Stadium, where I don't believe we've had an empty seat in over a decade now. So we certainly are planning and preparing for that. And that is ongoing. The first step in all of that, of course, is getting our student athletes back on campus, not only at the University of Utah, but elsewhere, and really trying to figure out how many weeks does a young man need to be prepared to come back for a football game. And a national standard right now is settling in at around 6 weeks. So you look at that first week in September and you go back 6 weeks, that's really the timeline that we're looking at.
So what will it be like to go to a football game at Rice Eccles Stadium?
Well, we have an incredible event management and facility team at the University of Utah, and they've been working day and night to really look at different strategies that would provide safety, of course, for our student athletes and all those participating in staging the game, but also for our fans. And when I say for our fans, it's at any level. We'll start with the positive level, which is a sold out crowd where we're right about 86% renewal rate, which speaks to the Ute passion. We're very excited about that number, but we also recognize that depending on where the state is at that time, we might have limited crowds. So we're looking at everything. But the one thing that's really important to me and all the folks working on this is we need to make everybody comfortable when they come into the stadium. And so anything that we can do to achieve that, we're looking at. But you could see, for example, maybe a limited crowd and where we'd have to space people out in some reasonable fashion. And then perhaps we would have different entrance times, things of that nature. All are logical and all are doable. But we're also looking at things such as doing away with the hard ticket. For example, perhaps it's time to go digital, which certainly technology is able to do that now. So we're turning over every stone, working with our stadium partners. But the thing that we know is true, we're going to focus on safety, but we're also going to focus on the ability for us to do it in the best possible way.
What will the experience be like for an athlete? Will it be different? And as they come back to school, will their training be different? How are you going to look after the safety? I think is what I'm asking of those. There's a lot of impact. There's a lot of close quarters in sports. How do you protect their safety?
Well, that's, of course, the primary concern in all of this. And quite candidly, Governor, it was like that prior. We've come a long way in college football and college athletics in general of following the science. This isn't new to us now. It's been something we've been doing for a long time. So our focus will be on their safety. I think you ask what's different. I think one of the things that we're really working with our coaches on is, there is a certain culture that perhaps, if you're sick or you've got a cold or you have the flu, you're coming to practice anyway. Right? That's kind of what you do in sports, particularly at this level. So we're already working with our coaches and our doctors and folks to really talk about, let's be candid and honest in how you're feeling. And if you're not healthy, then that's a day that you won't be at practice. I mean, it's as simple as just keeping an eye on that type of behavior, because we want everyone to compete in a healthy manner. But in terms of this level of sport, I have no doubt that our students will be just as athletic and physically ready to go than they would. We are approaching a really exciting time. June 1st per the NCAA is really looking like the opportunity where we can reopen our athletic facilities. We've been working very hard on that. So once we get our students back and they start working on a volunteer basis with our strength coaches, I think we'll begin the process, so to speak, of bringing them back, because we start off with soccer in August. Then into volleyball, and then of course then into football. And we're planning to be ready for all those sports to begin on time.
There's a degree of interdependence here. That is to say, you have home games, and the great Ute fans know what to expect when they get to Rice Eccles Stadium. But you have away games, and there are dedicated fans who travel, and there are those members of the team who have to travel to a different environment. So we have to trust that what's going on where the games are played is somewhat doing a lot of the same things you are. What are you hearing from around the country, and how do you look at away games and their safety?
Well, that's a great question, and we've been spending a lot of time in the Pac-12 about really making sure we're following similar policies as we have this comeback model. Now, of course, we don't have control, so to speak, of all our competitors. But I think generally in college sports, the idea is we're going to follow some standards. that Dr. Hainline and the NCAA and his working group have been working on to really make sure that, in stadia, with your teams, all of those things, there's some standards that are understood to keep people safe. So we know our Ute fans travel. We expect that to be a part of their fall as we begin to go. And I like, Governor, how you said it in the beginning. We're entering this new time of individuals and the ability for individuals to go out and make decisions. And I think that's true when you travel. Being able to follow and do the right things and guidelines, I think will allow us to be able to be as robust as we can be. But I think really at the end of the day, if people make great decisions when they travel, I think the stadiums that they visit or the venues that they visit this year will be following really good protocols.
Most of the people who are involved in sport will be involved probably at a club level, not just at the university, but soccer teams, little league football teams. You're dealing at the intercollegiate level, one of the highest levels of sport. Do you have any advice for those who are coaching little league football or coaching a soccer team or at the head of a league that's making decisions? Now, those are hard questions, but any advice from an important sports figure?
Well, I appreciate the question. I think sport obviously is such an important part of our society. And in the 2 years that I've lived in Utah, it's certainly maybe in some regards even more so here. And I think it's really important as we look at the comeback of our whole society that youth sports is a big part of that. From a personal standpoint, my son is a little leaguer, and him not being able to practice has been a downer for him, and like all children, going through this change. But I was able to take him to practice for the first time this week with some of the new guidelines that are in place, and just to watch the jump in his step and his focus when he came home, and he was even nicer to his sister, which was a nice thing for all of us to see. And it's just part of giving hope and something to be confident for. So I'm excited by the fact that there's so many great leadership in the youth sports in this community. And I know the student athletes, the 565 that we have, are all born in those type of sporting communities. And, kids need their teams right now. And I think we have great coaches and great leaders in this state who will keep our kids safe. But, let's get them outdoors. Let's play ball.
Well, Mark Harlan, thank you for not just your appearance today, but the contribution that you and others like you make to the culture and to the energy and life in our community. And that's what we're here to talk about. It's how we can engage, rebuild our businesses, and re-energize our communities. And you're a big part of it. Well, thank you. And could I just remind everyone who is listening, if you'd like to ask Mark a question or our previous guests or our future guests, check the chat button and ask your question. And in just a moment, we're going to be answering those questions. We'll now go to Erica Hansen. Erica is a community relations manager at Hogle Zoo. Erica, the zoo is open, and my grandchildren love to go.
I love
What's the visit
hearing
like
that.
right now?
How old are your grandkids? What's the age span?
Well, we have 15 grandchildren, so we're big supporters of the zoo, and they start at 4 and go to 14. So all of them zoo fans. And so if I brought them to the zoo today, what would I find?
You know what? We were one of the first zoos in the country to reopen. So we're really proud of kind of leading that charge. And we're grateful for kind of the steady leadership that we've had here in this state in kind of helping us safely and cautiously open back up. But you will see some changes. Your zoo visit will look a little bit different. We've had to do some of the things that we've all gotten really good at. We've had to increase distance between visitors. So that means we have a limited number of people who can come to the zoo each day. We are doing timed ticket entry, so you have to go online and reserve your time spot. This helps us also do touchless interactions throughout the zoo. We've set up one-way directional travel through the zoo. We still have our indoor spaces closed. Food options are only available at walk-up windows. And some of everyone's favorites, Governor, and you're probably familiar with the train carousel and the play area, those places are still closed. And we're hoping maybe as we get closer to phase 2 that we might be able to open some of those up. But so far, it's going really, really well. And people seem so grateful to have a place to go and stretch their legs and let the kids blow off some steam and a place where they can feel safe.
Well, I wonder if you have any advice for parents, or may I say grandparents, who bring their children to the zoo.
I think advice is interesting because the zoo is a place where you encourage your kids to run and explore and climb on all of the sculptures and all those different things because we want it to be immersive and interactive. And now we're in this phase where we're discouraging that. We've blocked off some of the sculptures and some of those favorite things that kids climb on. But I think having them know what to expect, we have little arrows through the zoo, so a lot of kids are enjoying looking for the next arrow so they know where to go. We have hand sanitizer stations throughout, and I just think as long as you're kind of vigilant and making sure some of those high touch points, if you're not comfortable touching those, they are getting disinfected on a very regular basis. But we really just want you to come and have some great memories together and enjoy nature. And these animals have missed our guests, so it's been really nice to get some life back up there for sure.
Well, obviously the zoo is not just a place to visit, it's a place where people work. How has it changed? How has all of this changed, and what kind of protective um, measures are you taking for the employees?
That's a great question. And that was an interesting challenge for us as a zoo because, of course, our first commitment is to the animals. So we need them to be well cared for every day. So what we did was split the staff into two teams. So we had team A and team B. And the reason behind that was if someone on team A got sick, you lose part of your staff for up to 14 days. So we always wanted to have a backup plan. So we had staff also cross train in different areas. So someone from finance or marketing might be training in various animal care areas so that we always had a backup plan to take care of the animals. Once that tiger at the Bronx Zoo tested positive for COVID, we also kicked up our measures in some of those particular animal areas like big cats and primates. So those keepers are wearing even more intense PPE, those masks, respirator masks, and things like that. The rest of the staff were all required to wear masks. So we've been taking it very, very seriously. It's also been interesting as we open to the public, we have had staff be concerned because staff is required to wear masks, but the public is just strongly encouraged. So there's always that balance of masks or no masks, and it's a very tense issue I have found in managing the zoo's Facebook page when we reopened that. And so to any business that's looking to maybe how to navigate, it's a little bit of a landmine. I have found that people are very passionate on both sides of the mask issue. So that might be something that to just kind of give yourself a little warning about as you head in towards your reopening plans. But staff's taking it very seriously. We just want it to be safe and comfortable for both staff, guests, and of course our animals.
So this is, I'm sure you had a plan going into this, and I'm curious after you opened and you look back at your plan, what are some of the things that surprised you about your reopening? What are the lessons that you have learned that you might pass along to others?
One of the lessons I think that surprised us is all of your plans will almost get tossed out the window and almost immediately because I think what we've learned through this virus is it's just changing all the time. So we have learned to be very flexible. We've learned to be very adaptive. So our first day open, we just weren't sure how it was going to go. So we had people kind of stationed and we'd watch the traffic flow. And if people seemed confused about which way to go, we could pull another bench in and, so that we could kind of keep that one way direction. So we have learned as a staff to be very adaptive and very responsive. And I think what's been valuable for us as a zoo is to really engage our social media community. That's a great place to engage, to get those questions answered. We've done a lot of live components on our Facebook page that I think has really helped people get those questions answered, feel a little bit safer. We found there were half the audience was very eager to come back to the zoo. And then you've got the other audience that wants to just wait and see what happens over the next couple of weeks. And I think as they start to hear their friends came out and felt safe and they see pictures on Instagram and that kind of thing, people are starting to feel a little bit safer about venturing out. So as businesses start moving toward reopening, make sure you're really engaging your social media audiences because that's That's the community. So we were able to answer a lot of questions. We did a lot of live features while we were closed, trying to keep the zoo top of mind. And Governor, one of the things at this time of year is it's field trip season. So normally we would see tens of thousands of school kids come up to the zoo, free admission on their school field trips. And all those, of course, got canceled. So it was a great way for us. We would do Facebook field trips and we'd go live from a different place in the zoo each day so that we were still trying to give back to the community. And I think that helped build trust as well as we approached our reopening.
This is an interesting point. We're seeing, we had a special session for nonprofits. And one of the things that came out of that is that people are discovering new ways they can serve, new ways they can use the same assets that they have. And it sounds as though you're finding some things like that yourself. Are there others?
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to reach out to the community on a virtual platform has, much like our education system, we were hearing about how quickly they had to make sure students had the ability to learn. We're doing that too. So we have lots of summer camps and classes and different education programs that we've always traditionally taught at the zoo, or visiting the second grade classrooms throughout the state. So we've also had to learn and adapt and figure out ways to get those platforms virtual. So now we even have virtual birthday parties and different things, because our asset are those gorgeous animals that live at the zoo, and we want to just make sure the community always has access to them. So I guess if there has to be a pandemic, this is a good time to do it because we're all so interconnected. And so I think it's a great way that we can still kind of access our community that way.
Well, Erica Hansen, thank you so much for what you have done today and told us and taught us. And thanks for what goes on at the zoo. And we'll look forward to seeing you and the animals.
We'll see you up there.
Thank you. So we're going to now move toward our session for questions and answers. And I just want to remind you, it's still not too late. We'll be answering with our panelists. We'll be answering questions. But our friend and colleague, Andrea, is going to be moderating this session. So Andrea, do we have questions?
Thanks, Governor Leavitt. We absolutely have a lot of questions. First one goes to Sydney. So it's great to hear that schools are opening in the fall. There's been some questions about how you consider the approach as you get into that, balancing the full-time need of kids to be at school if their parents are working, and figuring out how to kind of balance the connection of schools to our ability to operate within the economy. Are there any thoughts that you've been considering as you're planning for that?
That's a really important question. And I think one of the silver linings where there are a lot of takeaways from this time, we've strengthened partnerships with parents and much better communication strategies. So really assessing the needs of the families in our community, and then connecting with childcare centers, with out-of-school groups, and thinking out of the box, if you will, of how we have better connections, and making sure that those students who need to be in school, physically in school, and have that childcare wrapped around them, that we can help work with families to make that happen for them. So that's why we need these differentiated models, because we know every family situation will be different.
Great, thank you, Sydney. Mark, a couple questions for you around the infrastructure that has to happen around sports to be able to play. So if the University of Utah is in great shape, but your opponents in California or in other parts of the NCAA aren't in the same position, how does that impact the ability of our sports here in Utah, our students here in Utah, to compete?
Well, it's certainly a question that's on a lot of folks' minds as we look at the regional impact of this virus. As a member of the Pac-12 conference, which we're proud to be, we are very united through this whole process. Obviously, from an optimistic standpoint, the hope is by the time we get into the summer and head closer to September, that we'll see more of an equalization and the ability for teams to practice. Out of Los Angeles today, we learned that the Los Angeles Lakers were allowed to go back to practice by the LA County. And I really do think that could be a good signal of data, in the right direction for them. So our hope is that, they're ready to go. But clearly that is going to be an issue. And there is a sense of fairness if one team is allowed to practice earlier than the other. So we're going to definitely be confronting that challenge as we go forward.
Great, thank you. Erica, did you find that your animal family was less stressed when it was quiet, the zoo was quiet and closed?
Necessarily, it's kind of interesting because there are some species that very much respond to visitors more than other species. So for instance, our primates were very curious about where guests, at least appeared to be very curious about where guests were, especially because when staff would walk by, they were very interested to come over and say hello. And so it was kind of like they went from a deluxe cable package when we were open to only 4 network channels, not many people to watch, not many things to see. So the animals by and large have really enjoyed having guests back, and some species just don't care. Big cats can't be bothered to even notice or care, but the staff sure is glad to have guests back.
That's great. Sydney, back to you. Are there skills that our educators need to learn or acquire to be more effective with virtual learning? And did anything come to light that we didn't know our teachers needed to know? And as we're planning forward, there's probably a mix that, or a change maybe that they've made in their teaching styles. Any thoughts or comments on that?
Those are great questions. Um, and there's a lot in that, but I would just start with saying I think one of the immediate challenges that we uncovered was trying to figure out the pacing. So pacing at home, or meaning the amount of work going home in a digital environment, or even if it was paper and pencil environment with packets, that's hard to gauge sometimes when you don't have the kiddos in front of you in a set schedule. So I think getting that right, everything from kids were busy for 45 minutes to 8 hours, we had a variation of how busy kids were. And so I think that's one thing to navigate. There's obviously the digital platform piece, and I think coordinating in the school among platforms. I heard from some parents where they were working with their children and may have had to have learned 5 to 7 platforms for themselves. So trying to be more consistent, I think that's something that schools will need to work out, and making sure that our teachers are very skilled in platforms. Again, we did have a lot of support to this point, but it was the teachers that were really eager. So now it's become an essential skill for all of our teachers, not just for those who are interested or willing to dive in. So a lot of essential learnings for our teachers for sure, as embedded in the question, that need to shift. And that's the digital space, what's essential, how much time is relevant, excuse me, and then how do we weave in what students are interested in as well.
Yeah, and a quick follow-up questions to that. How about benchmark testing and learning assessment? Any new approaches to that or thoughts that emerged through this situation?
We need to find out where students are at, of course, even in the summer months as we look at learning loss and learning gaps, thinking about the unfinished part of learning. So we do have benchmark assessments that can be utilized. We don't have to go out and make new purchases or find something out there. Our school systems already had a lot of those, what we would call formative assessments in place. So they'll be utilizing those to determine where the kiddos are at. And those will become even more important as we move through the school year.
Great, thank you. Mark, we have a couple questions for you about Rice-Eccles Stadium. First of all, it's under construction, so has that been impacted at all, and how will that affect games in the fall? And then what lessons have you learned about how to have fans in the stadium?
Well, concerning the ongoing construction of the Ken Garff Performance Zone, which is the renovation of the South End Zone, which will take our capacity up to about 51,000, we are absolutely on schedule. Layton Construction and that team have been phenomenal throughout this whole process. The governor, of course, has signaled construction as being a key part, and they've been out there doing their thing in a safe way. So we're really good in that project, and we're expecting our opening to be in the 21 season at this point. In terms of lessons learned and working with my colleagues and talking about, the fans, whatever number that we're able to have in that particular date of that game, we're just sharing a lot of ideas. There hasn't really been a large scale event for us to model yet, but we anticipate there could be some of that. But going back to my earlier comments with the governor, I think it's just really important that people just feel safe. And I think we need to talk to our fans throughout the next 30 to 60 days and really get ideas of the things that we're thinking about to really get their opinions. But again, we're thinking about avoiding lines where we can, staggering entrances. We're even looking like what would you do in a concession environment, so we space that out. And whatever at that time makes the most sense, we'll have ready to deploy. But we're going to do a lot of listening with our season ticket holders this summer. We're going to be talking to a lot of colleagues, and I would say any event organizer, I think really needs to be talking to their colleagues right now. There's so many great ideas. Encourage people to really reach to other folks that are in this space and not be wedded to any single idea. That's the one thing I've really learned, where you think you have something and a couple weeks later maybe it doesn't make sense. So continue to be open-minded, talk to colleagues, and really develop a true best practice as we move forward in all of this.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Erica, as you went into the planning phases to open for visitors, what are the assumptions that you made regarding opening, and what adjustments have you had to make since you've opened? Were you right in your assumptions, or are there things that you learned that you had to pivot?
Both. We made some assumptions correctly and incorrectly. I think that we were interested in what the response would be. So I think we assumed um, everybody would want to come back to the zoo almost immediately. And while there's a portion of the population that was true, like our members and that kind of thing, there's this large population of people that is just waiting to see what happens next. So I think that was a key factor for us in a lot of ways in determining how many guests we can have on grounds at a time, in determining how many strollers should we have available to rent, how much food to prepare, those kinds of things. So it's just kind of been interesting to track some of those numbers. The interest is there, and people who are there are very excited to be there. So I think as the state continues to open up, I think we have a lot of eager people who were very ready to come out and get some fresh air and blow off some steam. And so I think the main thing that we learned is just being able to pivot on a dime. I think having the hand sanitizer stations has been great. And I think that we've been surprised and delighted by how many people want to come up and eat some food too, and get a hamburger and get corn dogs and French fries and all that tasty food. So we went from closed to open in 2 days. So it's also feels like rusty gears trying to get in motion as we try to build our staff back up, our seasonal staff and all those great people that come up and help us with food and those kinds of things. So we're still kind of trying to ramp up to meet the demand.
Excellent. Thank you. This is a question for anyone, and I'd be interested in hearing perspectives from your different areas. There are different risk levels for people. Somebody who's 24 is a different risk than somebody who has a pre-existing health condition or is 75. So how, as you plan, because you've got people who your businesses are interacting with, who have various levels of risk, how are you thinking about adjusting to risk level of individuals?
I'll start. That's certainly true for our educator workforce. So we have teachers and staff members who may not feel comfortable coming into school, who may be at different risk levels. So thinking about retooling what they do or how they do their job. For some of those teachers, they might be the teacher that may teach some students remotely who, for whatever reason, either don't feel comfortable coming in or have risk factors for coming into the building. So some of it is just retooling their ability to continue working from home if that lends itself to their job. And then for our bus drivers, for example, right now, many of them are delivering food on route. So a lot of retooling in the workplace. I think that's pertinent across the board for those who may be at risk and needing to work from home or work in a different way. And then we have kiddos in our schools who not only may they be at risk, but we have to think about, as Governor Leavitt indicated earlier, it's about everybody's actions that will lend to a safer start in the fall. So it's not just about the people in our workplaces, but how they're impacted by the risk factors for their families as well.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's a great question in that, we know that a lot of focus on our student athletes of a low risk, population, but we also know we have fans that are in various different levels of risk in this. And so we're really trying to be thoughtful on the plans. And, one of the things we did, again, in talking to colleagues across the country, both in the pro space and in the college space, is we've just designed some of our ticketing. For example, in football, if you're not comfortable this year, we developed a plan to work with you to invest. Don't lose your tickets, don't pay the full amount, but then we'll see you back when you're comfortable. We just wanted to provide some flexibility for those folks. And so, that's just one example of others. And as our event management team, starts to work with various different populations, we may come up with different concepts in Stadia that might make sense. It's an interesting path to think about, but something I think we're going to be very cognizant of moving forward.
And I'll just chime in at the zoo, because we serve a wide variety from infants all the way up to grandparents. We did open Tuesday mornings from 8 to 10. We do have 2 hours that are open to those that are more vulnerable in our population. So we're doing that. And that's also the reason that we are strongly encouraging guests to wear masks, because it helps protect the visitors and also staff. If you have staff with some underlying health issues, just kind of helps across the board. But we do have those 2 hours once a week, every Tuesday morning, for those vulnerable populations.
Excellent, thank you. And the last question I have is for you, Governor Leavitt. How do you, as a business owner, deal with the question of liability, providing a safe workplace environment for your returning workforce?
Well, actually, that is a very good question, a pertinent question. It's being asked around the country, and I think will likely be resolved or refined in the courts, because the question of what a business owner's responsibility is in terms of disease is not fully worked out yet. But we're all benefited from taking measures, not just because of the potential of liability, but because of the economic value that healthy employees bring. So we'll all be working on that one, Andrea, and thank you very much for your moderating those good questions. Today we learned that schools are going to be opening in the fall. We learned that there'll be a few differences, and that we'll be learning as we go. The schools are not just pursuing the learning responsibility they have, but schools are ground zero for a lot of things, and they're looking after the emotional and physical well-being of their students as well. They're going to have some budget problems that they're going to have to deal with, but we'll all do our best to help them there. We learned that football and sports will be returning, that we are in fact moving toward re-energizing, and that we can go to the zoo, and that while the experience may be a little bit different, we're learning from it. In summary, we learned that opening up isn't a declaration of victory over COVID-19, but it is the beginning of a time to rebalance and to learn. We're going to learn, just like all 3 organizations that you heard from today, that things we plan don't work out exactly the way we plan them, so we have to move forward. We learned as well that every person has a different situation, priority, and risk tolerance, and that we're moving now where our social behavior or our group behavior will be supplemented and offset to a degree by our individual behaviors. Our social behaviors haven't continued. Our group behaviors still have to happen. We need to wear those masks, follow the rules, and hopefully we'll see the entire state shift to yellow at some point soon. We're glad that part of the state has, and we hope at some point in the near future, or the future at least, we'll be all back to green. One of the underscored points of our entire series has been this is a long-term process that we're learning to manage, not one we're going to be able to solve overnight. So with that, we'll conclude and go back to Dean Taylor Randall of the Eccles School of Business for one final word about the future.
Governor, thanks for moderating today. We thank our panelists for all of their insights and certainly the lessons we learned from them and how they're managing their organizations right now. It gives us a lot of confidence for the future. Thanks as well to the George S. and Dolores Dory Eccles Foundation for making this series possible, and we thank you as viewers for joining us. Next Friday, we're going to be focusing on the data that you should be looking at to make your decisions for forecasting and planning. As always, keep your wits about you. We're getting through this together. Thanks a lot.